I've researched the world, region by region, to understand the past and the present. I'm excited to bring the World Monthly to Amica. 2 months ago, I presented Iran and the Persian Empire, the first of a 3-part series on the Middle East. Last month, I presented part 2 on Israel and the Arab countries. Today, I will be presenting part 3 on Turkey and the Ottoman Empire. As this is on Turkey, they're going to gobble up this presentation. Our presentation has 6 parts: the Ottoman Empire, World War I, World War II, modern-day Turkey, other issues, and fun facts. Part 1, Ottoman Empire. It was founded in 1299 by the Oghuz Turkish tribal leader Ottoman I. Even though it was of Turkic origin, it was Persianized in language, culture, literature, and habits. To understand the full history of the Ottoman Empire, we have to start with the Byzantine Empire, which was a continuation of the Eastern Roman Empire.
Okay, just keep on going. Video. What's that?
Now let's learn some more about the Ottoman Empire.
Lasting for more than 6 centuries, the Ottoman Empire has been known as one of the mightiest and longest-lasting dynasties in world history. This Islamic-run superpower is regarded as both a source of strong military force, ethnic diversity, and an empire with notable achievements in arts and architectural constructions. History. The Ottoman Empire was initially just a small beylik in Anatolia, or Asia Minor, a large peninsula in Western Asia, which originated from the Seljuk Empire, a large empire that included modern-day Mesopotamia, Syria, Palestine, and most of Iran. Following the final Mongol defeat of the Seljuks in 1293, Seljuk territory was quickly divided into small principalities, which were led separately by various tribes, including the Kei. In 1299, Osman I, a descendant of the Kei tribe, established a formal government and formed the Ottoman Turks. The name Ottoman is derived from Osman's name, which means Ottoman in Arabic. The next few years witnessed the conquest of this small beylik towards more powerful neighbors. By 1326, under Orhan, son of Osman, the Ottomans took control over Bursa, and the following years captured the Byzantine territories bordering the Sea of Marmara, making way for the Ottoman expansion toward Europe. At its height, the Ottoman Empire covered several regions, including Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, Egypt, Hungary, Macedonia, Romania, Jordan, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, parts of Arabia, and a considerable amount of the North African coastal strip. The most glorious period. A host of scientists firmly believes that the most glorious period of the Ottoman Empire occurred during the reign of Suleiman, the Magnificent, a brilliant military commander, religious leader, as well as political ruler. Under his reign, the Ottoman Empire started its massive expansion towards Eastern Europe and managed to invade several big cities. In 1521, Suleiman controlled part of the Hungary territory and continued annexing Hungary's parts in 1526. By early 1529, the Ottoman arrived at Vienna, the capital of Austria. Besides Eastern Europe, Suleiman I also commanded the most powerful and modern naval force at the time to conquer Asia. His massive expansion turned this empire into an extremely large state, and by the time he passed away, its total population reached 15 million. Moreover, under the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent, this Islamic rule superpower also attained considerable accomplishments in domains of politics, law, and culture. Specifically, the reforms and attainments Suleiman I reaped are called the Golden Age of Islam, which has exerted enormous influence on countries in the region and all around the world. This period was also marked by major achievements in fields of science, mathematics, engineering, philosophy, medicine, literature, economics, etc. For example, the Ottoman was considered the pioneer in the field of vaccination. The method of vaccination, or variolation, referred to then as inoculation, had been practiced for centuries against smallpox in Ottoman lands before it was popularized in Britain and Europe in the 18th century by the wife of the British ambassador to Ottoman, Lady Mary Wortley Montagu. In 1717, during the smallpox epidemic, she had witnessed the application of variolation in Constantinople and helped spread the technique throughout her country and thereafter Europe. Notable achievements. Besides occupying large areas of the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and North Africa, the Ottoman people also took pride in significant achievements in various domains, such as arts, science, medicine, architecture, and so on. In particular, the period that Suleiman I came to the throne marked a turning point in the development of arts, architecture, and law. Regarding law's reform, this mighty sultan had codified a secular legal system called kanun for the Ottoman state. To be specific, it refers to laws showing the relationship between taxpayers and recipients of their taxes, thereby regulating taxation's types and rates. In terms of architectural construction, a large number of elaborate mosques and public buildings were built, which reflected the characteristics of Ottoman culture via minor details, contributing to define the culture of the time. Constantinople, recently known as Istanbul, built up as the capital of the Ottoman Empire under the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent, remains its beauty until now and has become a popular tourist attraction. Concerning such academic fields as science and medicine, the Ottomans also reached remarkable achievements. In science, Ottoman people had learned and acquired a sound knowledge of advanced mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, physics, geography, and chemistry. In medicine, several instruments invented at that time, namely forceps, catheters, scalpels, pincers, and lancets, are still used worldwide today. Regarding the domains of arts, you can easily discover such a large number of popular forms of arts invented at this time, such as calligraphy, painting, poetry, textiles and carpet weaving, ceramics, and music. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire. The beginning of the 17th century marked the slow decline of the Ottoman Empire. The decline, firstly, was reflected through the loss of economic and military dominance to Europe. Despite the Ottomans' efforts to invade new territories, its defeat at the Battle of Vienna in 1683 no doubt contributed to the weakening of the empire. By the 19th century, Ottoman's power was becoming weaker and weaker as it lost nearly all of its territories in Europe during the Balkan War in 1912 and 1913, resulting in its challenging economic situation as well as increased reliance on the rest of Europe. In the middle of the 19th century, Ottoman Empire carried out a reform to modernize the state itself as well as to improve its status. Nevertheless, the reform turned out not as successful as expected. And it was the outbreak of World War I that made the Ottoman Empire completely dissolve. During the war, the Ottoman army entered the war on the side of Central Powers, including Germany and Austria-Hungary. Central Powers were defeated by the Allied powers in October 1918. As a result, according to the Armistice of Mudros, the majority of Ottoman territories were divided among Britain, France, Greece, and Russia. In 1922, the elimination of the Ottoman Sultan's title officially put an end to the Ottoman Empire, giving the foundation for the Republic of Turkey in the following year.
Here's a size comparison between the British, Mongol, Russian, and Ottoman empires. The British Empire was the biggest empire ever at 33.8 million square kilometers, and the Mongol was at number 2, 33 million kilometers square. The Ottomans were at number 24 at only 5.2 million square kilometers. Part 2, World War I. World War I was caused by the death of the Austro-Hungarian Empire's Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who was the heir to the throne. He was killed by a 19-year-old Serb. At this time, Austria-Hungary declared war against Serbia. And through a bunch of alliances, it became a worldwide affair. The Central Powers, Austria-Hungary, Germany, and Ottoman Empire were the Central Powers. The Ottoman Empire hoped to escape diplomatic isolation, which had contributed to its recent territorial losses. The Allied powers were formed by the Triple Entente, also called the Friendship Agreements. They were between the British Empire, the French colonial empire, and the Romanov Empire, also called the Russian Empire. During this time, Persia was neutral, but it ended up being occupied by Turkish, Russian, and British troops. 2 million or more Persian civilians died in these conflicts. There were many promises made and treaties entered that were broken. There were decisions made and not made too. They continued to create hostilities. In 1916, Britain promised Arab independence. They promised that if they helped fight the Ottomans, all these countries which were under the Ottomans would be given independence. So they helped the British Empire and they destroyed the Ottomans. But Britain was lying in the Sykes-Picot Agreement of that same year. This agreement was done to divide regions near the Ottoman Empire, and it was between the UK, France, with assent from Russia and Italy. This was Britain's broken promise. Britain got southern Israel, what is now Palestine, southern Iraq, Haifa, and France got Turkey, the Kurdistan region, Syria, and Lebanon. But this agreement was based on the idea that the Ottomans would lose. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration expressed Britain's support for the idea of giving the Jews a homeland. When the Russian Empire ended in 1917, communism was introduced. This was caused by ineffective leadership and weak infrastructure during the war. This was the end of Tsar Nicholas II's reign, who most Russians at this time did not really like. The Russian Revolution went on for 6 more years. The Bolsheviks seized power, Lenin's people. The Russian army was disintegrating, and the Germans had pushed far into the country. No one really cared if they won or lost. They just wanted to stop the war, so a truce was agreed. In this truce, which was called the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, Russia gave up to close half of its European territory. Poland, Lithuania, and part of Latvia were given to Germany and Austria. Ukraine, Finland, Estonia, and the rest of Latvia became independent states under German protection, and Romania and Armenia were given to the Ottoman Empire. Russia also lost prime agricultural land, which was 80% of its coal mines and half and Putin's legacy. They also committed to pay $6 billion marks in reparations. Lenin refused to follow through with this treaty after he learned that the Allies had won the war. November 11, 1918, at 11 a.m., there was an armistice for World War I. We will never forget. The Ottomans committed the first genocide in the 1900s. They killed 3.5 to almost 4 million Christians, Armenians, Turkish Muslims, and Greeks. This included almost 1.5 million Armenians, even though they wanted to kill almost all 2 million of them. The Allies drew up the map. Promises and agreements were made, and their consequences, especially today in the Middle East, are still being felt. After World War I, 4 empires ended: the Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the German Empire, and the Russian Empire. The Treaty of Versailles is usually called the only treaty, but this treaty only changed the German Empire. The government changed from a monarchy to a republic, so the German Empire became the Weimar Republic, also called the Second Reich. This treaty also forced Germany to give territory to France, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, and Poland, cede its overseas colonies, reduce the size of its military, and pay war reparations to around $500 billion today. The Treaty of Saint-Germain broke up the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They had to recognize independent Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary, and Yugoslavia, and they ceded their eastern regions. The Franco-Turkish War was caused by French interest in the region, which resulted from the Sykes-Picot Agreement, where they thought that they would be getting most of the Anatolian Peninsula. The Treaty of Trianon was the breakup of Hungary. They lost 2/3 of their territory and people. Slovakia and the Czech Republic merged into Czechoslovakia. Western Hungary was given to Austria. Croatia was given to Yugoslavia, and Transylvania was given to Romania. The Treaty of Sèvres abolished the Ottoman Empire. Turkey had to renounce all of its rights over Arab Asia and North Africa. An independent Armenia, an autonomous Kurdistan, and a Greek presence in certain areas were forced. They also had to give parts of their territory to France, Italy, and Britain. It had terms far more severe than the Treaty of Versailles. Severe, Sèvres. The breakup of the Middle East was further caused by the Cairo Conference. The leaders of many Arab countries became part of the Hashemite family. So Prince Faisal became Iraq's king, and Prince Abdullah became Jordan's king. The Kurds were not given their own country, though. The British Empire peaked in 1922. It had 458 million people, a quarter of the world's population at that time. As we've said before, it was the British Empire ever. It was the biggest empire ever. The Treaty of Lausanne was really the treaty when Turkey was created. It was the second attempt at peace after the failed and unratified Treaty of Sèvres. It was rejected by the Turkish national movement because they didn't like that most of their land was being given to the Allies. The Treaty of Lausanne also recognized the boundaries of Turkey today. It now had no claim to any Arab countries, and it had to recognize the British possession of Cyprus. The Allies dropped their demands of giving the Kurds their own country. and there were no controls over Turkey's finances or armed forces. Part 3, World War II. It was caused by Germany's invasion of Poland, and the USA was brought in by Japan's Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. Turkey changed sides in 1945 because they were neutral until the end of the war. This prevented access to the Middle East to Germany. The UN was formed after World War II because the world wanted peace. So 50 countries' representatives created the UN, which replaced the League of Nations. It was mostly done to prevent another world war like the one they had just gone through. The Japanese Empire ended in 1945 when they surrendered, also ending World War II. In 1947, with American involvement, a new constitution was enacted. In 1947, people really realized that the British Empire was about to end. Israel was given independence. There was a proposal by the UN recommending a partition of Palestine, which would have created independent Arab and Jewish states. And Jerusalem was to be governed by a special international regime. But as we can see by today, this has never happened. NATO was formed in 1949. Its main premise was to make sure that a war on one country is a war on all of them, 30 countries. Turkey joined in 1952, and this has played a key role in Turkey's security. Part 4, Modern-day Turkey. Turkey today has 82 million people, its capital is Ankara, its GDP is around $900 billion, and its GDP per capita is $41,000. Its president today is Recep Erdogan, who was the prime minister from 2003 to 2014, and he was the president from 2014 to today. In 2017, he actually abolished the powers of the prime minister in a constitutional reform, and his house in Ankara cost $1.5 billion. Even though, by the looks of it, I don't think it was that worth it. Turkey now has an upcoming general election.
NordVPN. In the next couple of months, Turkey is due to go to the polls to elect a new parliament and president. Now, incumbent President Erdogan has been in power for the best part of 2 decades, and while he might not go down too well in the West, his Islamist-tinged populism has proved genuinely popular in Turkey. However, over the last few months or so, Erdogan's appeal has begun to wane, and polling suggests that he's now behind the main opposition candidate. So in this video, we thought we'd take a look at the 3 reasons why Erdogan might lose the next election: the economy, the newly unified opposition, and his lackluster response to the earthquake. Now, before we get into it, a couple of caveats. Firstly, these 3 reasons aren't intended as an exhaustive list, but please let us know in the comments if you think there's anything obvious that we have missed. Secondly, because we try and be a neutral and balanced channel, we're going to release a video on the 3 reasons that Erdogan might win the election, so go and watch them if you want to know more. But essentially, because Turkey's economy relies quite heavily on imports, Turkey's inflation rate has surged over the last 18 months or so. Now, usually, central banks hike inflation rates in order to reduce inflation. But Erdogan thinks that this idea is a conspiracy advanced by the so-called interest rate lobby. So instead, he decided to cut rates and fire any central banker who dared to disagree with him on this policy. Accordingly, the central bank has cut rates from 19% in March of 2021 to 10.5% today. And as orthodox economists would have predicted, year-on-year inflation has jumped from 20% to over 80% by the end of last year. Now, while that might sound bad, unofficial estimates suggest that things are even worse. An unofficial index that measures inflation in Istanbul, compiled by the city's Chamber of Commerce, put the inflation rate at 107%, while another unofficial index, developed by the Independent Inflation Research Group, put it at 185%. Now, while year-on-year inflation fell to 5.5% in February, and Turkey's GDP has apparently held up relatively well, inflation has still eaten away at ordinary Turks' living standards. That's because despite the fact that the Turkish economy grew by 5.6% in 2022, this growth was driven by strong exports enabled by a weak currency and a desperate consumption binge by Turkish households, who realized that they needed to spend their lira before it became valueless. So while growth does look good, the reasons underlying it aren't all that positive. On top of that, despite successive minimum wage increases, wages are still way behind inflation, and as such, the vast majority of Turks have seen steep declines in their living standards. However, the economy isn't Erdogan's only issue, and the second reason he might lose the next election is Turkey's newly unified opposition. Essentially, the opposition parties realized a while ago that the only way that they were going to defeat Erdogan was if they formed a coalition, which is why, in December last year, the 6 main opposition parties, known as the Table of Six, announced that they'd be running together on a package of constitutional reforms that would primarily aim to return the country to a parliamentary democracy. For context, Erdogan himself created the current executive presidential system, which gives sweeping constitutional powers to the president, with him doing so via a controversial referendum in 2017. Fortunately for Erdogan, however, the Table of Six's unity was immediately strained by their inability to decide on a leader. According to polling, the 2 most popular candidates were Mansur Yavaş and Ekrem İmamoğlu, the opposition mayors of Ankara and Istanbul respectively. However, despite their popularity, the leader of the main opposition party, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, apparently refused to give up the reins, despite the fact that he's significantly less popular than either of the other 2 candidates, and the fact that he's lost to Erdogan multiple times in the past. And just last week, this issue looked so major that the alliance looked at risk of collapsing altogether, with the leader of Turkey's right-wing Good Party saying that she'd leave the alliance largely because she didn't think that Kılıçdaroğlu was fit to lead it. However, on Monday, the alliance finally announced that they decided on an official new hierarchy. Kılıçdaroğlu would be their official presidential candidate, while Yavaş and İmamoğlu would be vice presidents were they to win. Now, this decision is yet more bad news for Erdogan, both because a united opposition is obviously more effective than a divided one, but also because polling suggests that, while he might not be as popular as some of the other candidates, Kılıçdaroğlu has already opened up a healthy 15-point lead over Erdogan. But there's another reason that Erdogan's in trouble. The third reason is Erdogan's lackluster response to the recent earthquake. Now, you likely already know this, but the earthquakes that struck Turkey and Syria last month, especially the 7.8 magnitude one, have been truly catastrophic. Over 50,000 people have died as a result of the quakes, of which 40,000 were Turkish, making it the 5th deadliest earthquake in the 21st century. On top of that though, 1.25 million people have also been made homeless as a result, and the UN estimates that the damage will exceed $100 billion in cost, over 10% of Turkey's GDP. Now, obviously, a natural disaster isn't necessarily bad news for an incumbent government. After all, it's not like it was Erdogan's fault. However, his response and some of his policies that preceded the earthquake have been criticised. For instance, Turkey's search and rescue teams were slow to arrive at the disaster and struggled to make a dent in the enormous amount of damage. But Erdogan originally refused to accept any criticism for the state's response. After an intense backlash, he did eventually apologise, admitting that we were not able to work in the way we wanted to in the first few days, and for this I apologise. But by this point, it was too little too late. Erdogan's government has also been criticised for misspending the natural disaster tax revenues, worth about $3.5 billion, and failing to effectively enforce safety regulations brought into force after the 1999 earthquake. That's because in order to stimulate construction and economic growth in Turkey, Erdogan repeatedly issued amnesties on these regulations. And some of the buildings that collapsed during the most recent quakes were built under those amnesties. As such, there's a deep historical irony here. The Turkish state's lackluster response to the 1999 earthquake and the massive inflation that followed helped to propel Erdogan's AKP party to power in 2003, when Erdogan promised to improve government efficiency and prevent this kind of thing from happening again. Today, Erdogan finds himself on the opposite side of a very similar situation, and this time his mishandling of the earthquake has undermined the implicit deal that he made with the Turkish people back in 2003. But while he might be a bit autocratic, he's more effective than the dithering Democrats of the West. So, those are the three reasons that Erdogan might lose the next election.
Best places in Turkey to visit.
Turkey is a unique tourist destination bustling with culture, history, majestic beaches, lofty plateaus, exotic islands, great food, and much more. Here are 10 places you should see in Turkey. Cappadocia is a bundle of historic cave dwellings and fairy chimneys that can be viewed from the sky in a hot air balloon across the morning sunrise. The city is perfect for hiking through valleys, horseback riding, visiting forgotten cave churches, and taking spectacular photos. The Aegean coast is famous for its crystal clear beaches and bays across the Mediterranean Sea and is one of the most popular tourist destinations in Turkey. Among its popular beaches and resorts, it is also home to one of the world's greatest hiking trails, the Lycian Way, and the 15th century Ephesus Archaeological Museum. Turkey's Black Sea region is famous for its natural beauty and is where a large portion of Turkey's famous tea is produced. It accommodates many mountaintop plateaus, iconic stone bridges, historic churches, lakes, and monasteries such as Sumela, which is located 300 meters in the air and is more than 1,600 years old. Pamukkale is an ancient Roman natural spa city with pure blue basins filled with calcium-rich water. Its name translates to Cotton Castle, and its white pools speak for themselves. Plus, it's open for paragliding. Mardin is a unique offbeat southeastern city and shows the rich architecture of the Artukid dynasty, with old madrasas, mosques, churches, and monasteries. The city is definitely a sight to see. Van is famous for its distinctive odd-eyed domestic white cats, but it's also a great place for sightseeing. A short boat ride away is Akdamar Island in Van Lake, where a 10th century church sits among beautiful almond trees. Other attractions include a castle, historic sites, and waterfalls. Konya is known as the city of the mystic Sufi poet Jalaluddin Rumi. Once the capital of the Seljuk Empire, the city is home to many cultural sites, including the mausoleum of Rumi and Sine, a 5,000-year-old village on the outskirts of the city. Turkey has many islands to see. The Princess Islands are a popular day trip destination from Istanbul, and other islands like Ali Bey Island and Gökçeada are a few hours away. Burdur is home to Lake Saldo, which has white sand beaches with crystal clear waters and is one of the 5 cleanest lakes in the world. The lake resembles the Maldives, but isn't the only attraction in the city, which has endless purple lavender fields and the Kibera ancient city known as the City of Gladiators. Istanbul is the most populous city in Turkey and the only city in the world that stands upon 2 continents. The old city has a timeless charm. It is surrounded by historic mosques, palaces, and many cultural sites, including the Maiden's Tower in the Bosphorus Strait. It's a city where East meets West and has a lot to offer everyone.
suspension bridge in the world. It is called the 1915 Çanakkale Bridge. It has a length of over 2,000 meters and is the sixth cross of the Turkish Straits. Lights.
A structure of superlatives, the Çanakkale Bridge in Turkey. It's said to be the longest suspension bridge in the world, connecting the continents of Asia and Europe, and is one of the most significant infrastructural projects undertaken in the region. A team of international specialists are in the process of implementing this challenging construction project. The joint venture between Turkey and Korea, DLSY, has also opted for the professional know-how of Germany-based Liebherr Tower Cranes.
The project started in March 2017 and will be completed 2021. Currently, 5,000 employees and approximately 100 subcontractors are engaged on the project.
The dimensions of the Çanakkale Bridge are impressive. A total length of 4,608 meters, a 2,023 meter long middle span from pylon to pylon, and a height of 318 meters. Plus, each of the bridge's pylons weighs in at over 37,000 tons. All of this makes it the longest and tallest suspension bridge in the world.
The connecting cables consist of galvanized high-strength wires. The total length of all wires will be 162,000 kilometers, which is 4 times around the world.
The bridge's construction presents significant challenges for all those involved. The problem? Extreme weather conditions and regional natural forces. To address this, Liebherr Tower Cranes has developed an optimal solution for operations at heights surpassing 300 meters. 2 high-performance, specifically configured luffing jib cranes are able to meet the formidable requirements.
In collaboration with the customer and our static department, we had to find a safe solution to put 2 357 HCL cranes with a weight of 130 tons each on a cantilever fixed on a bridge pylon with a height of 310 meters. The main challenge was the fact that the site is located in a highly active seismic area. Therefore, we had to provide an earthquake-proof tower crane configuration, which was successfully accomplished by our static and tower crane solutions departments.
The construction cranes are designed with a tower height of 37 meters to provide the flexibility necessary to counter any potential earthquakes. Performance capacity is in no way restricted.
Both cranes are equipped with special 160 kilowatt hoist gears, allowing them to lift loads up to 20 tons for this project. As well, small loads can be lifted from sea level to the pylon deck within 1 minute.
All required construction materials are transported to the 2 pylons by boat and then lifted by the construction cranes. Tight platform conditions, some adverse weather, and constant maritime traffic make this a challenging job that relies on the operative precision provided by the 2 Liebherr cranes.
The level control system features like level locking and micro move and the reinforced moment control help us a lot for safe and efficient operation.
When complete, the Çanakkale Bridge will become a new link route for millions of people. It's a major milestone for progress and economic development in the region.
Part 4, Other Issues. The breakdown of the Soviet Union. Boris Boris Yeltsin allowed the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. In 2005, Putin said this: "First and foremost, it is worth acknowledging that the demise of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the century." The EU disagreed.
You remember when the Russian president said in 2005, "We should acknowledge that the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the century." Today in Georgia, I want to say loud and clear: the collapse of the Soviet Union was a blessing to Georgians, Poles, Ukrainians, as well as to the whole of Central and Eastern Europe. And I'm convinced that also to Russians.
Turkey tries to join the EU. The EU has accused Turkey for many human rights violations. Officials said that the 2017 constitutional reform violated their laws. Pope Benedict had always discouraged them from joining because most of the country is Asian. 97% of it is Asian. Turkey allowed Finland to join NATO when Erdogan ratified Finland's bid. He made the announcement saying that Finland had taken concrete steps to address concerns over groups he saw as terrorist organizations, especially ones that are supporting the Kurds. Turkey is still blocking Sweden from joining NATO because Swedish protesters were burning the Quran outside of the Turkish embassy. They were supporting secularism. Provoked by this action, Turkey has not yet allowed them to enter the organization. Iran, Saudi Arabia, and China have recently created a peace deal. This signaled at least a temporary reordering of the usual alliances and rivalries. Let's learn some more.
Iran and Saudi Arabia are restoring their diplomatic relationships for the first time in 7 years. Iran and Saudi Arabia have had a tumultuous relationship for decades. Both countries will now reopen their embassies for the first time since 2016, when Iranian protesters stormed the Saudi embassy. The Chinese government, which has been trying to strengthen its political and economic influence around the world, helped broker the deal during 4 days of secret talks. David Sachs joins me now. He's a research fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. So David, what's in it for Beijing with this deal?
Yeah, I think it's mostly about reputational benefits that Beijing could have. Essentially, it wants to show that it's not just an economic powerhouse, but it also has the opportunity to play a major diplomatic role. Xi Jinping clearly wants to show that China is a global power on par with the United States. I don't think that it's any coincidence that this occurred on the same weekend that Xi Jinping was confirmed for his third term as president of China. And so right now they want to show that they can offer an alternative to US-led leadership to countries in the Middle East, in Europe, as well as in South Asia and the global South.
What do we know about the 4 days of work and China's assertion of influence here as diplomats?
Yeah, I mean, the most interesting anecdote that I read about this whole process was that Beijing insisted that English not be used during the negotiations, that it be conducted in Chinese, Farsi, and Arabic. And to me, that's a very clear sign that Beijing is looking to offer an alternative to the US-led order, and that it doesn't want to be seen as playing a part of the current US-led order. So I think that was a very interesting thing. And I also think that again, what this really does show is that China is trying to play a diplomatic role in the Middle East. And we also see with it putting together its peace proposal for Ukraine, Xi Jinping reportedly going to Moscow maybe as soon as next week, and then a phone call with Zelensky after that, that this isn't just occurring in isolation. China is, I think, trying to really flex its diplomatic muscles on the world stage.
The U.S. is obviously trying to pin back China in all kinds of different ways, most notably with semiconductors. In terms of U.S. relations with China, what's your view of it? Is this dangerous, or is this the kind of thing the U.S. says, you know, it's a busy world, have at it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that we should overreact to this, and I don't think that our reflex should be that anything China does is by definition bad and something we should oppose. If this brings down the temperature in the Middle East, which has been the most volatile region for the last couple of decades, then that's a good thing. And if it allows us to somehow find a way for the war in Yemen to end, then that's also a good thing for the United States. I don't think that this necessarily means that the order in the Middle East has been overturned, that Beijing has surpassed the United States for influence in the region. We're still the security guarantor for Saudi Arabia, so it's not really a major realignment per se.
One of the things that the Trump administration used to argue is that on North Korea, that if China wanted to show its diplomatic strength in the world, that it would work with North Korea. Is there an analogous situation with Russia? In other words, getting Russia out of Ukraine, solving that, or coming to some end there would be a serious global coup. How much leverage does China really have with Russia?
Well, they have a ton of leverage with Russia and with North Korea, as you mentioned. I mean, this was pretty low-hanging fruit, right? It was in all the countries' interests to have this deal occur. Iran has interest here, so does Saudi Arabia, and so does China. But with North Korea, that's much more difficult, and as you noted, China has been unwilling to bring North Korea to the table. And with Russia, too, I believe if China decided to put real pressure on Putin, they could bring him to the negotiating table. But Xi Jinping's calculation remains that it's important that Putin not lose the war in Ukraine, and that this is a broader contest, again, one that it needs to get Russia on its side for a longer-term contest with the United States for who will lead the next decades.
All right, David Sachs, thank you so much for being with us.
Part 5, Fun Facts. Why are turkeys called turkeys? Once imported, Europeans used to call the guinea fowl the turkey cock or turkey hen because it came from the Turks. Once settlers in a new world began to see similar looking birds, they called them turkeys. Why do people call others turkeys? In the Roaring '20s, turkey was used as slang for an inferior theatrical or movie production. It then became an insult, referring to a person who has done something stupid. Butterfly story. My family and I went to the Cambridge Butterfly Conservatory. My parents wanted me to interact with others, so I always asked people how they said butterfly in their home language. I got up to 23 languages. So in Turkish, kelebek, in Hebrew, parpar, in Arabic, farasha, and in Farsi, parvane. Thank you. The next presentation will be on India.